Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Topping off the tires. Topping off the tires. Oh wow, yeah, we were low. How low can you go? 110. Iron. It was supposed to be cooler today, but it feels hotter. I mean, the sun feels hotter. Whew. See ya. It's like humid or something out here.
Yeah, I know.
It feels nasty.
It's like, damn, I ain't felt that since home.
Yeah, I'm looking at the temperature and I'm going, well, it does say it's 96, so I guess it's pretty warm too.
Yeah.
Warm and wet. Nasty.
Nasty.
Just nasty.
Does not work out good.
All right, man, have a good night. So, what's up there, folks? Couple of things going on today. First of all, remembering 9/11. Today is September 11th. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit, but on a good news note for 9/11, we have confirmation that Ryan's bike is done and fixed. However, they didn't replace it with like parts. So apparently they didn't have any triple cranks to replace the broken crankset that Ryan had. I guess originally he had, it was a 50, 39, like 24, something like that. And they didn't make it anymore or couldn't get it anymore or something. So they swapped him out for a double. So now he's essentially going to have the same gearing that I've got. It's a 50-34 compact crank up front. Only 2 speeds, but you know, that works for most of us out there. However, this is actually going to be kind of a downside for him because his rear cassette, he's only got 9 speeds, and his largest gear, or his easiest gear, I think is a 28, which for the most part, you know, most of your riding you can do on a 34-28 and not have too many problems. But we shall see, because there were some hills that Ryan would throw it all the way down into that 24 to try and spin up. So the good thing, I guess, is that Ryan's going to get a little fitter because he's not going to have as easy a gearing. Now on to the secondary topic. I always like to think about what I was doing on 9/11 all them many years ago. Man, I just can't believe it's already been, what is this, 15 years now? 16 years? 16 years, holy cow. But yeah, it's gone by quick. There's a lot of people at work that, I mean, they were just little kids when it happened. Some of the coworkers I've got were in elementary school. Yeah, I was, how old would I have been? I would have been 19 years old. I would have just turned 19 because my birthday is September 10th. So the very next day when the attacks happened, I'd only just turned 19. And it's definitely one of those things that I guess being so far removed from it, it was a little easier to take. You know, growing up in California, we didn't have the threat that y'all had back east. I'm kind of curious to hear what Jobs' experience was like back then. Obviously, he would have been much younger, you know, and just in elementary school at the time, but I am definitely curious to know what his side of the country was feeling like and how he felt, if he noticed any change in atmosphere. For me, it was a really interesting day. I went to work as normal, and immediately you could sense that there was a change in atmosphere. There was a greater coming together, I guess you could say, of people. It seemed like everybody was really nice that day. Like everybody understood that something bigger than them happened. Something more important than them was going on. Obviously, the tragedies had their own unique stories, but as individual citizens, I think we all at least remember what we were doing that day. I mean, I very, very vividly remember the morning, because it was the first time I'd ever seen my dad get really riled up and worked up about something. I was asleep because my job, I didn't have to be at work till noon, and I was at home, and my dad came in and woke me up and said, "Hey, you need to come watch the TV, something big's happening," or something happened. And I walked out, and right after I got out into the living room and I'm looking at the TV, that's when the second plane hit. And when that second plane hit, my dad just immediately went into a frenzy. Basically, you know, this wasn't an accident. We're gonna find these MFers and we're gonna hunt them down. We're gonna kill them all. Yada, yada, yada. Now, mind you, my dad was a huge liberal. He was about as bleeding heart as it gets. I mean, he was when he was my age, he was a young Republican. I don't mean my age now. By my age now, he would have been a bleeding heart liberal, but when he was 17, 18, 19, he was a young Republican. He grew up in a very staunchly Republican household. But then the Vietnam War happened, and that changed a lot of his social outlook on life. He started seeing things differently. And so when he returned from service over in Vietnam, he had a pretty big change in his philosophy of life and politics. And, you know, was no longer conservative or Republican. So all my life growing up, you know, I had a liberal father, a liberal mother, and to see my dad go from this peaceful guy that never wanted war to we're gonna hunt these guys down and kill them was very interesting for me. The rest of the day was pretty much kind of an odd thing. Got to remember, cell phones were just starting to get really popular at this time. But even living on the West Coast, the cellular lines were so jammed, I assume with people trying to call their loved ones to see if they were okay, you couldn't make outgoing phone calls at all on the cell phones. Or if you did, you know, you have to try multiple times. Text messages weren't really a thing at the time, if I recall. I don't think you could text. Or if you could, it was crazy expensive, like 10 cents a text or something like that. But I just remember going into work, and at this time I worked at a paintball store, and yeah, the whole day was just really somber, and people were extraordinarily nice, man. Everybody seemed to understand that all the little shit that we normally get obsessed with, you know, getting to work on time or making, you know, a left-hand turn right now, all that seemed to slow down, and people just were nice. And that lasted actually for a little while, a couple of weeks at least. You know, by the second day, third day, you started seeing like American flags on every car. I mean, they'd put these tiny little flags on the antennas, and the patriotism really started to show through, like I said, for a couple days. And then it kind of got sad, because as those little flags would fray and fall off, they started collecting in the gutters everywhere. And it, along with that, the attitude seemed to go back to normal. But that short period of peace and unity was kind of nice and interesting, you know. Something we definitely don't have right now, that's for damn sure. You almost wonder if, as divided as the country seems to feel right now, if we had some kind of a major attack happen again, if it wouldn't almost wind up being a positive, right? I mean, I'm not asking for an attack to happen, and I'm not asking for thousands of people to die again, but it might just be enough to make people realize that we are really one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, and not blacks and whites and Mexicans and Asians and all these different sects. But that's kind of where we're at right now. It just feels like the division is so much stronger than it's ever been. But, you know, in my own opinion, there's a purpose to dividing, and I truly believe that these groups are being misinformed by their leadership on purpose to make it feel like there's more separation than there truly is. And the reason why that's happening is because underneath all of the rhetoric spouted by either right or left, there's this ultimate goal of division, because these parties want to reshape the United States, take it down from what it's been, tear it apart, and make it something different, because they don't like our system and our government the way that it is. And the way that you do that is you divide and conquer. I mean, it's a simple strategy that goes back millennia. You know, if we were all on the same page and we all understood just how undivided we really are and how little racism there really is, then we wouldn't be so distraught by some of the acts that happen. And I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. It obviously does. I know people who think that they're better than others because of their race. Now, it might surprise you to know that a lot of the people who think that they're better than others, they're not whites. They happen to be Hispanic. And they look down on black people with the same disdain that people seem to think that white people all look at black people and other races about. But, you know, it is what it is. But as I've been told by my more liberal bleeding heart friends, well, Mexicans can't be racist because they're a minority. They've never held power like white people have held power. And all that they're doing is they're reflecting the white mentality, yada, yada, yada. Bullshit. Bullshit. No. Racism is something that it goes through all the races. I mean, this is something that it isn't just an American thing. It isn't just a white thing. My dad spoke about racism over in Vietnam. Racism from the lowland Vietnamese to the highland Vietnamese. And they were called mountain yards, which was a derogatory term because the people who lived in the mountains were darker skinned and they had a different way of life than the lowland, lighter skinned Vietnamese. And he said that they were treated as bad, if not worse, than the black people were treated back in America during the big civil rights or pre-civil rights movement of the 1960s. You know, they had just as much disdain for their own people, if not worse than, because while it wasn't uncommon for, you know, racist groups like the KKK to string up people because maybe a black man and a white woman were having a relationship or something like that, it was dang near guaranteed that you weren't going to have a relationship with a white Vietnamese person if you were a mountain yard. And I apologize if mountain yard is a term that's derogatory still to this day. I mean, I don't know. I'm only going off of what my father saw and what he knew them to be called. But if it wasn't for these mountain people, there would have been very little help for the American soldiers at the time, because it was the mountain yards that came and gave the most assistance to the military effort, because they had more to gain from the Americans being there and being successful, because they were going to get some representation finally if a democracy was kept in place there. Ultimately, you know, we failed to do so, so the mountain yards got ultra screwed in the end. But anyway, I just figured I'd share a little bit of my remembrance of 9/11, and I apologize that it's kind of spun off into this rant about racism in America. But I strongly feel that that's one of the biggest reasons why so much emphasis is put on division of cultures and division of religions, divisions of color, all these different things. They want us to be separate because ultimately the power is held as long as they keep us divided. If we're a unified nation, if we're a unified mind, we the people really have power. But if you can control each side and manipulate their points of view, you can make them think that they're really different from each other when actually we're all pretty close to the same. We have subtle things that make us different, not major things. But the powers that be want us to be divided, want us to feel like we are different fundamentally, that we're as different as fruits and vegetables, you know, when we're not. Anyway, guys, Kind of a longer video today, obviously. A little bit of a ranty video. Hope it wasn't too crazy. Hope it wasn't too windy. I noticed there were some points there where my ears were really just pounding with the wind. So hopefully the mic wasn't too messed up. Anyway, y'all, have a fantastic day. I'll talk at you next time.